Uh,
Hello, everybody. I'm Frank Clark, and I'm here with Steve Robbins, the Get It Done guy. We're going to be talking today all about startups and, maybe answering some questions about startups that people in the audience might have. And first, let me just start off by introducing Steve. Steve is the CEO and co-founder of Ideas Unlimited. He's been founder of Ideas Unleashed. I apologize. He has been a founder of an early team member of about 10 startups, multiple IPOs, and multiple acquisitions. He's also helped develop the Harvard Business School MBA program and assisted with strategy development at Babson College, the number one ranking college in entrepreneurship worldwide for the last 15 years. And he is also the host of the iTunes Top 10 Business Podcast, the Get It Done Guys, Quick and Dirty Tips to Work Less and Do More. Did I get that all right there, Steve?
Done Guys, short, pithy title.
I like to Get It Done guys. Everybody's always trying to figure out how to get things done more efficiently, and David Allen getting things done model and many more. So I've known Steve for a very long time now, and Steve, in addition to being brilliant in the business community, is also considered a leader in the NLP community, and is very well known in that community as well. So we've got a lot of insights to share on both of those types of topics. So let me just start out by asking you, general, like, how did you first get involved in business and with startup companies, Steve?
Well, the way I got involved with startups, once upon a time, it wasn't the thing to do.
Right.
In fact, it was exactly the thing not to do. Only weirdos didn't go to big companies. And when I was 14 years old, I wanted a job. I moved away from home when I was 14 and needed to support myself and was looking for a job. And the only company that would hire me was it wasn't actually a startup company. It was a small business that had been around for many years and in Escondido, California. And I went to work for them. They had about, I guess, maybe 15 people, something like that. And the head programmer, it was a software company, the head programmer left that company to start his own company. And after he left, he hired me to come work for him. And so I was basically, if he was employee number one and co-founder, I was employee number two. And in terms of the technology, actually, I literally wrote the software product that was their entire product. I mean, I did.
Wow, that's amazing. At 14?
Well, actually, I didn't. I did other things for him, and when I came back and did that product, I was actually 19 at the time.
19 by the time. Gotcha.
Yes. That's I might add, I was paid as a 19-year-old. I was not paid commensurate with what I should have been paid.
Right.
The kind of work that I did.
Did you get any equity or bonuses?
I did. And if you want to talk about lessons, I got options in the company. It was a small company, and the options had, I believe they were 15-year options. And I let them expire because after 14 years and 11 months, it didn't look to me like the company was still in existence, didn't look to me like they had any good prospects. So rather than spend the $5,000 exercising the options, I allowed them to expire. The company was acquired 8 months later, and if I had exercised those options, I would have made about $1 million.
Oh, my gosh.
Welcome to my world. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I share some of your pain there with these types of experiences.
Are we gonna talk about angel investments?
We're not going to talk about that right now.
All right.
But I was also I did a stint as an investment banker and had a bunch of warrants that had expired worthless. And then, a year or two later, one of the companies I had warrants in really took off, and those warrants, would have been very valuable. Right. But I missed the boat. One of many boats I've missed along the way.
Warren Buffett likes to say that the biggest mistakes that he's made in his career are mistakes of omission. They're things he didn't do but should have, like exercising options and so on and so forth. Of course, the non-mistakes that he made that he did follow through on have made him the richest man in the world. So I'm not exactly crying for him, obviously.
Well, Warren Buffett himself on a recent interview was talking about what has really enabled him to be so fabulously wealthy is obviously good business decisions along the way, but really what's contributed as much or more than anything is compound interest and a long life. So the fact that he's lived so long and been able to enjoy the effect of the compound interest has massively accelerated what his net worth is. And
he also has an attribute that I think goes extremely underappreciated, which is that he has the ability to sit on large piles of cash until he finds an investment opportunity that he thinks is worth taking. And there's a lot of people who don't have that ability. So as soon as they have cash or some sort of asset, they feel like they have to put it into some instrument, even if it's an instrument that's going to underperform over 30 years, the instrument they otherwise would have gotten into a year later had they held onto the cash and waited for the right opportunity to come.
Right. Yeah, and I know that happens all the time. And I've, as I said, I've done a number of things, some of which you know about, some of which you don't. But I did a stint also as a financial advisor, and I saw during the crisis I was over working with people in the financial services arena in 2007 and 8, and trying to encourage people to diversify their portfolios. Right. A lot of people had very high percentage of their portfolios tied up with their stock in companies like Lehman Brothers, for example, Citigroup, and the others. And people were like, "Well, this has been doing great. I'm not going to let it go."
But past performance is no indicator of future.
That's right. That's right.
A solid analysis of the business fundamentals might be a better predictor. One of the things that I found fascinating about the whole 2008 collapse, I am not a finance person, and I do not pretend to be. I know basic finance. I basically know business school level finance. I went to business school. And so, I can do simple multiplication, addition, and, subtraction, things like that.
Sure.
And in 2006, I ran across a 1-column-inch article on, I think it was in like the Wall Street Journal or someplace, that was just reporting Wells Fargo's quarterly results. And it gave like 6 numbers. The reserve, how much money they were reserving for bad loans, the total loan volume, whether it was increasing or decreasing, and like the default, the percentage of defaults. And in fact, it's still up there on my blog somewhere. You can find it if you go to steverobbins.com and search for Wells Fargo, I guess. And what's so fascinating is from that single column-inch story, if you simply looked at the numbers and thought about them intelligently, like what do these numbers mean, you could conclude that they were writing bad loans. Like there was no other possible way for those numbers to be the numbers they were, except for them to be writing increasingly low quality, doing increasingly low quality underwriting.
Right.
And I just remember kind of looking at this when 2008 finally happened and everyone started going, "Oh, poor us, no one could have predicted it." I'm like, actually, you could have predicted it with pretty much high school algebra, not even algebra, arithmetic, with elementary school arithmetic and this much business understanding. It was completely obvious.
If you're paying attention and know what to look for and have some level of awareness, which most people don't.
And if you don't have a tremendous ego investment in not seeing it, which, by the way, is one of the things we're talking about is entrepreneurship. One of the attributes that an entrepreneur really has to have is tremendous optimism and the ability to stick with their idea, even in the face of people doing naysaying and in the face of the unpredictability that it takes to actually get stuff up and running and the perseverance needed and so on and so forth. Of course, the flip side of perseverance and optimism is just self-delusion.
Right.
And striking that balance between where am I simply deluding myself and where am I usefully deluding myself?
Right.
I honestly don't know any good way to make that decision. I look at companies like Uber and Twitter, which have huge market capitalizations, and everyone's like, "Oh boy, we want to suck your toes," to the founders and all that stuff. These aren't businesses. These are not, if you actually look at the business fundamentals, Twitter is not a business. Twitter's I don't know what it is, but it's not a business. Uber is a taxi dispatch service. If you take a look at what the margins are on taxi dispatch services, yeah, you can make a decent living, but a $50 billion market cap is let's just say I'm more than a bit skeptical.
Right.
But at the same time, if you've got enough confidence in what you're doing and you can spin the right stories, you can raise that $50 billion valuation and that money. And once you have that kind of money, you might be able to use it to build a company. Even if there isn't business fundamentals there, you might be able to acquire companies. You might be able to hire people who know something about business to build a business, etc. So I'm not at all saying that optimism isn't, and by the way, the people who founded these are still getting out with their millions. It's the people who invested who are going to get screwed. But, I kind of look at this and I go, it's a very interesting relationship between perseverance and optimism and delusion. And an awful lot of it is if you happen to find a way to thread the maze, then it was perseverance and optimism. And
Right.
if you actually get screwed because you run into a brick wall at 60 miles an hour, then we say it was self-delusion.
Right. And it's funny. There's some insights that are potentially useful in kind of decoding or breaking that up from behavioral economics, such as the endowment effect. So someone who already owns something values it at much higher level than somebody who doesn't own it yet. So for an entrepreneur who has an idea, that endowment effect kicks in. The other one, which you're familiar with, is biases. Obviously, we're all subject to biases, and we don't always know what our own biases are, and those can get severely in the way of making effective business decisions on startups or in any other aspect of business. So we have a question from eBoy. What are the first signs of early delusion? Do you want to maybe field that and talk a little bit about?
Sure. Yes, I would love to, actually. Okay. So what are the first signs of early delusion? One, I believe, is an obsession about things like valuation. Valuation is obviously something that's important when you're going to a negotiation session, but there was an entrepreneur who was a coaching client of mine. And in fact, not only was he a coaching client, I'd invested in his company. And he got to a point where he was, whenever we would talk, he'd be talking valuation. It was essentially, oh, my valuation is bigger than my friend's valuation. And valuation is the result of finding and exploiting opportunity. It's not the thing that makes the opportunity come into existence. And if you find yourself obsessing about what is the current valuation, what should my valuation be, that's the wrong thing.
Right, absolutely.
Whenever you find yourself looking for any of these proxies, what really matters in a business is, are you producing something that people are willing to buy at a price that is greater than what it costs you to produce it? That's really the fundamental. And if that's the question that's driving you, you're not going to get deluded. You can be really, really optimistic, but as long as you're willing to look at the numbers and say, oh, wow, we optimistically thought we could sell 4,000 of these. We sold 3. We thought we could sell them at $10,000 a piece, and we sold 3 at $4 a piece. You'll be optimistic and say, we're going to find a way to sell more of them, or we're going to search for something else we can sell. But if you find yourself saying things like, well, it's just going to take a little while longer to take off, or, we just have to sell more of them at $3, and then eventually it'll build up to this $1,000 business. Whenever you find yourself making claims like that, if you believe it, great. Put an actual measurement in the ground. So
metrics. I will absolutely metrics.
Well, I metrics plus deadlines. So one of the things that I'll do is when I do a speculative bet like that. So I'm going to say, you know what? I have confidence that. Well, let's take Ideas Unleashed, my new company. We have some very specific theories about what we can sell. The company is less than 3 months old. We're still actually learning a lot of the pieces. So I would almost say we're still in stealth mode in some sense, because we're certainly not out there. We're not ready for a huge influx of clients yet.
Right.
But one of the things that we're saying is, look, we know there are certain skills and certain capabilities we have to acquire and we have to learn. And the way we'll know we've learned them is that we can execute at a certain level and produce certain kinds of results. So we have a theory that this particular course of action we're taking, which is that we're teaming up with somebody to do a pilot project. We have a theory that pilot project will produce a certain minimum level of results in a certain time frame. So by June 1, 2016, we think it's going to produce certain results. And the results aren't all monetary. Some of them have to do with learning and with hiring and things like that. So on June 1, 2016, in my calendar already is an outline for an entire strategic review of all the bets that we're making. And what I'm saying is, at the time that I am making the bet, I'm saying, here's how I think this bet is going to work out. So that way I don't end up with hindsight bias. I'm not going to wait until June 1st and go, oh, I was really just planning on selling 3 at $4. So right now, what I have in there is we're planning on selling 1,000 of them at $1 million. And on June 1st, I'm not really going to be able to escape that. I'm going to up is going to pop this thing, and it's going to say, do your review. Did you sell 1,000 at $1 million? So I'm going to go, no. It's going to say, well, if you sold fewer than 500 at less than $20,000, then this isn't a viable business.
Right. Shut it down now, or re-strategize what you should be doing.
Exactly.
Which is great. But that's brilliant, because you're building in checks and balances, which most people don't, and most people end up, especially in a startup type of environment where it's extraordinarily chaotic, but because you've got product development and marketing and branding and employees and management and all those types of issues. So you've got a storm of chaos brewing all the time in a startup world, and to have that kind of metrics, but time delineated so that they don't get away from you, is critically important, because otherwise you end up down the road saying, no, well, let's just try this, let's try that. And you're doing a million things, but you never bother to check in with common sense or common metrics to determine if you're going in the right direction.
Well, and to get back to the question of how do you keep yourself from becoming delusional, see, now I'm free to be delusional from now until June 1st. Right. But at June 1st, it's going to pull me back down to reality. And by the way, June 1st is probably a long time horizon. I have some intermediate milestones there between now and then. But essentially... And
June 1st is also going to come up on you faster than you expected, because, time goes by like that.
Don't remind me. Yeah. But the thing is, and this is one of the things that's really important. In fact, I did a Get It Done Guy episode about this. One of the things we're finding, big surprise, right? No matter how long I'm in business, I still get blindsided by this. No matter how long you think something's going to take, it always takes twice as long. So
it costs twice as much, by the way.
Oh, yes. But is often worth it,
right?
Even if those. So one of the things that I do is not just record the bets that I'm making in terms of my optimism and what I think we can achieve, but in terms of my optimism around scheduling, or my optimism around the quality levels that we can produce. And I have this. My notebook is too far away. I can't reach it from here. But I actually have this in a daily operational log, that when I believe something's going to work out a certain way, and I'm like, oh, I'm optimistic, of course, I'll be able to send out this marketing email in 4.5 minutes. All I have to do is type it in and press send. And so I write down on my little log, send out marketing email. Estimated time, 4.5 minutes. And then I go and I type it in and I hit send, and it says, your message is not formatted correctly. Please choose a blah, blah, blah. And I do that, and then I hit send, and then it sends the test message, and I notice the test message is in 9 different fonts, even though in the editor it was in 1 font. So then I spend 45 minutes figuring out that problem. And then 2.5 hours later, I finally press send, and it sends the message, at which point I look down at the message it just sent and realized I forgot to include the purchase link. So
now you've got to do a kind of like another email saying, oh, sorry about that. I meant to include this.
If you're interested in that thing I advertised, here's the link to buy it. But what I've done there is, on the log next to that 4.5 minutes, now I write 2.5 hours, and then I write a little explanation of here's all the things I didn't think about. Now, the next time I have to send a marketing email, I'm still going to think in my brain it's going to take 4.5 minutes, and then I'm going to look at my log and go, well, last time it took 2.5 hours. Here are all the reasons. This time, I'm going to take these reasons into account from the beginning. I'm going to make sure I type it in 1 font. I'm going to make sure I include the registration link, et cetera, et cetera. And then I hit send, and then it says, oh, you forgot to select a mailing list, and I select the wrong mailing list, and I send it out, et cetera, et cetera. This time, it only takes me 1.5 hours. And I write that down in the estimation log, along with why, and gradually I come up with a list of all the stuff that could go wrong and all the ways to fix it, and my estimates will start getting longer than 4.5 minutes, but my real time will start becoming less and less and less, and they'll probably end up converging on half an hour or something like that.
Right.
But this is a way where I can continue to be unrealistically optimistic, and I have this external device that's pulling me back to earth and making sure that I don't just get too pie in the sky.
Right. So you can enforce discipline on yourself and sort of combat your own biases.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. That's great system. So tell me a little bit more. Let's go back to the earlier conversation. So you started this, you got involved in this startup company when you were 19 years old and ended up building and creating the whole product around that. How did that shape kind of your future direction that and it caused you to spend so much time working with startup companies and business and going to Harvard Business School and all that type of stuff? How did that sort of shape your early decisions?
Well, first of all, like I said, this was just really a random. This was random. I didn't set out to get involved in startups. When I was graduating from MIT, I interviewed for a job with a large multinational corporation as a programmer, and I went to visit to do an on-site visit at the facility where I would be working, and they showed me an org chart. And they, the org chart's like that. And they said, if you look way down here with the magnifying glass, that's where you'll be. And I said, oh. And so, after X number of years here, I can work my way up the chart. And then what? I'm like, I can be an executive manager of the company. They're like, no, this org chart is just this building.
It's just what?
Just this building. This was Bell Labs once upon a time.
Right.
And, so great. I could spend the first 35 years of my career working my way up to being senior in that building. And I just thought, I compared that with having written the entire product that this other company was based on,
right,
and deeply involved with the owner of the company and with the how he was developing it and his vision for it and everything. And I just said, why would I want to do this? Like, it makes no sense to me to want to be a tiny grain of sand sized employee in a giant cog, and no realistic chance to be much more than that without putting in decades and decades, when at the age of 19, I was doing something that was of vital importance to the company that made a huge difference. And by the way, I absolutely delivered. So, I knew that I was capable of delivering at a really high level. And
that's a fantastic experience to be able to draw on from such an early age.
Yeah. And, other people, it's funny because now the tables are turned, and my business partner is 20 years old. Which actually, I hadn't even really thought through the parallel. And I am purposely giving him tons and tons and tons of responsibility. Way more than anyone would normally give a 20-year-old. Now, keep in mind, we work physically in the same place. I can see what he's doing. I can coach him along to the point where, and he's a very, very, very smart person. So, so he's rising to the challenge, and I'm probably going to break him in the sense that he's not going to be content with less than this level of responsibility and oversight and involvement in anything.
Right. So you need to break him in the same way that you were broken of the delusion that you need to work for Bell Labs or IBM or some big monolithic company.
Right. And he is going to discover that he's not going to be content working for some big monolithic company after this experience, because, frankly, there are very few people who are going to be willing to give him the level of responsibility that he's capable of handling. Instead, everyone's going to give him the level of responsibility that corresponds to his age.
Right. And to their desire to get out of doing stuff that they don't want to do.
And this is what happened to me in some of the phases of my career. And I looked at this as I'm being paid for my age, not what I'm delivering. And because of that early experience, I wasn't really willing to put up with that trade-off. And really the only way, if you're not willing to put up with that trade-off, the only place to go is entrepreneurship. Because it's when companies are small and scrappy that they appreciate talent more than politics playing and all the stuff that allows you to get ahead in large corporations. And if you get in with the right startup, or if you found the right startup, then boom, you can have as much responsibility as the results that you're capable of producing. And that's one of the things that kept me coming back.
Right. Yeah, it's exciting. It's a hell of a ride because it's unpredictable, but the results can be just stunningly, amazingly outstanding when you get it right.
They can be, and also I would want to emphasize to people, there's no guarantee they will.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
What you hear about is the Googles of the world, and you hear about the situations where people made billions of dollars in 8 months. What you don't hear about is the 90,000 companies that were founded the same year, all of which struggled, and people worked hard hours for sub-market wages and ended up going out of business, and no one's ever heard of the company. And therefore, when they talk about their career to future employers, people say, I've never heard of that company, etc. Whereas you can be the frickin' receptionist at Google, and you go to your next job, and people will fall down and worship you because oh, you have Google on your resume. You're a receptionist. Doesn't matter what company you were at. There's only so much skill that's demonstrated. Maybe important skill, but only so much of it.
Right. Yeah. So, the thing is, with these with these startups, as you mentioned, there are waves where there are just so many of them, and in the moment you're the superstar, if you will. And there've been waves going back every decade. essentially about what was hot or cool or whatever. I mean, computers and Xerox and things in the 60s. Bowling alleys at one time were like the hot thing to get involved in the 60s. Also, actually, Brunswick was one of the top performing stocks of the earlier mid 60s.
Really? I didn't know that
because of the expansion of bowling alleys. Real estate obviously goes through its phases, as we saw in the early 2000s, or in the late 90s with the internet boom and bust, and now with social media, we're seeing it all over the place. And all of a sudden, there's social media companies starting up every 2 weeks or every 2 days or whatever it might be. This platform that we're on, Blab, is only I think about 6 months old right now.
I think we should start a company and make a chat app. I'll bet we could make a fortune if we just had the right chat app and got like 98% of the world's population to use it. Hell, we have a market.
Hey, we only have to capture 1% of 98% of the world's population, and we'll make a fortune.
You're right. Okay,
make zillions.
Now, I would say, well, I'll write the business plan now, but I'm not going to write a business plan.
Let's just go right to the valuation.
Let's do that. Yes. I think what? So we've already established that we're going to have 600 million people times, let's just call it a value per person of $100. That's like $60 billion. All right.
All right. Who do we know at Andreessen Horowitz who can back us on this?
I don't know, but Andreessen was just singing Marissa Mayer's praises and saying, "Oh, well, she couldn't have been expected to turn it around. She's done a fabulous job with Yahoo." I'm kind of like, dude, really? Like, really? You're willing to give the woman a 9-figure pay package because she claims she can do it? Then when she doesn't do it, you're willing to just go ahead and say, "Oh, she couldn't have done it." Why didn't you say that before you paid her the 9 figures?
Welcome to the CEO business.
Yes. Well, I will say, this relates to entrepreneurship. I am highly skeptical of anything that comes out of the mouth of someone whose job title is venture capitalist. And I don't care if it's Mark Andreessen or, Robert Graham or an awful lot of these people. Any venture capitalist who's younger than 70 or 80 years old grew up during a time when things were
too easy,
distorted. Yeah. And, Mark Andreessen, very smart guy, and happened to get in with Jim Clark and make $1 billion by the age of 21. And that's formed the basis of, of a lot of his optimism and things. And he's a smart guy. And as far as I can tell, it's subject to all of the same sets of mental memes that basically allow the rich and don't work very hard set to remain rich and not work very hard. And, I'm kind of like, look, dude, you would never put up with the performance by one of your portfolio companies, for example, that Marissa Mayer brought to Yahoo. And the fact that you're willing to give her a pass because it's such a hard problem, screw it. If you truly believe that it's a hard problem that warrants the kind of pay packages that you grant to people like that, and when I say you, I mean him, specifically when he brings in the CEO, etc. I'm like, you can't have it both ways. Either you genuinely say CEOs aren't that valuable and don't have that much of an effect, and you then make your hiring decisions accordingly, or you say they are, and then you hold them accountable in both directions, both when things go well and when things don't. I happen to believe that CEOs are not nearly that important. There are some things that are extraordinarily important for them to do, especially in an entrepreneurial business where a lot of what you're doing as an entrepreneur is figuring out what the business is going to be. And but especially when you're talking about larger companies and so on, yeah, strategy is important, no question about it in a company like that, and the deployment of resources. But so much of what goes on is going to be dependent on the vast, the tens of thousands of people who work for you, not just the CEO. Now it's different. I want to make a distinction between saying that what they do isn't going to have tremendous leverage, because by virtue of what a CEO does, if they make a good or a bad decision, it gets magnified many, 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 many times.
Absolutely.
But that's not a reason to pay them a lot or a little. That's a reason to say whoever we pay, whoever we hire, we want to make sure we're hiring someone that makes good decisions, because that decision is going to be magnified. And if the job negotiation goes like this, we're looking for somebody who can make good decisions. I can make good decisions. Really? Can you now? Good enough decisions that we can magnify them? Sure. In fact, such good decisions that you should pay me $100 billion. Then it's like, great. So if I'm going to pay you, what you claim you're bringing to the table is the ability to make decisions that, when magnified, are going to make me more than $100 million. That's
right.
In a rational world where we're all actually talking according to market forces, that's the way the conversation would go. Now let's get real here.
If you're going to hire somebody who's going to make you $10 billion, you're happy to pay him $100 million because he's more than making it up for you. But most of the time, as you're saying, as you're rightly pointing out, is these people are overvalued to what they bring to the table, and people get caught up. And this is one of my pet peeves. People get so caught up in celebrity because this person was at Yahoo or they were at Facebook or they were at Google. They must be brilliant because they rode that ride and they were a leader there. So obviously that's going to translate. Well, if it's going to translate, then how do we properly incentive? Because I think we live in a society that's filled with massively distorted incentives that has massively unintended consequences and externalities that we all end up suffering from. I mean, going back to anything from climate change to the bailouts after.
You're
politically correct.
You're not actually. The phrase. Do you know about the history of the word of the phrase climate change?
No, educate me.
Well, you're an NLP person. You should know this.
Okay.
The word was global warming up until the year 2002, when a man named Frank Luntz did a study where he hooked people
up to Frank Luntz, yeah. Where's the work?
He hooked people up to galvanic skin response machines and heart rate monitors and discovered if you use the phrase climate change, they didn't get scared. Whereas if you use the word global warming, they did get scared. Now, he had been hired by the Republican Party and a bunch of oil companies to reduce people's fear of global warming. And he wrote this memo where he basically said, don't ever refer to it as global warming again. Call it climate change, because those words don't trigger the same response in people that the words global warming do. And I have a copy of this memo. This is not, in fact, you can find it. It has since been leaked. If you just Google Frank Luntz global warming memo or climate change memo, and it was all an explicit strategy. Now, of course, the most brilliant part about it is he convinced scientists, climate change is more accurate than global warming, which is bullshit, by the way. Global warming is the accurate statement. Climate change only applies locally. So the correct phrases are global warming and local climate change. But the other correct phrases are just global warming. So anyway, so if you're thinking about politically correct, what it means to be politically correct by using the phrase climate change is it means you are deliberately buying into and promoting a propaganda campaign that was paid for by somebody who was explicitly in the pay of people who have a partisan economic interest in reducing people's desire to address climate change.
Right. So that's a great point. And I'm glad you pointed that out. And thanks for the education. Frank Luntz, for people who haven't heard the name before, wrote a book, which is a marketing book called Words That Work. Yep. So words clearly are critically important. And, you need to be aware of this when you're developing startups and become familiar with the importance of language, because it affects everything you do. It's the type of thing that has massive consequences that gets magnified, as Steve was referring to earlier. So when you're talking about composing an email or a tweet or a Facebook post, or you're talking about an advertising campaign, whether it's print media or television or radio, if you're choosing poorly with your words, that message then is going to get magnified and determine long-term success or failure. So you want to very carefully choose your words, just as Steve was rightly pointing out with, this gentleman, Frank Luntz, and what they were doing to try and manipulate public opinion on global warming.
Well, even think for a minute about things like Uber, right? A lot of Uber's regulations are regulatory issues with people saying, hey, you're doing an end run around regulation, is because Uber is advertising itself as a transportation company. But in its defense, it's saying, we're not a transportation company. We're just like a classified ads company. We're just connecting buyers and sellers. And so we shouldn't be regulated as a taxi dispatch service. And it's interesting because, they're using two different sets of words in two different contexts, which may have unintended consequences. Because if they call themselves a transportation company or say things that imply that too much, then that hurts their battle to not be subject to the same.
Exactly.
But if they say, we're just a classified ad service, and they say that too loudly, people are going to go, well, that's not very valuable. And, come on.
Right. So they're balancing the razor blade there. walking the razor's edge.
Right.
And this happens all the time in communication of any idea. Obviously, it's critically important for startups and for startups that are looking to get their message heard. You want to carefully choose and select the words that are most closely tied to your branding or your punchline or what have you. And then later for things like your elevator pitch, your pitch deck, your business plan, etc. So these things matter greatly. And if you're going to be in the business of being in businesses, it's critically important to master language, master the use of specific words. I mean, I found when we were developing our company, the medical device company, we would agonize for hours or days sometimes over words, phrases, and sentences in letters or documents that were going out, whether it was a negotiation with a potential supplier or distributor, or a communication to potential investors or to existing investors, or something that we were communicating internally to get everybody on the same page. So we would endlessly craft, and we had three of us really who would look over each other's shoulders, and we would send a document around 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 times until we all felt comfortable that this was okay, saying what we needed to say. So
yeah. And remember, the point of your words can be different for different things. So if you're an entrepreneur, sometimes your words need to distinguish you from your competition. Sometimes your words need to reassure people that you're similar enough to an existing product category that you're not a risk. You're not a big risk. Sometimes your words need to persuade people to spend money. Sometimes your words need to reassure people that if they spend their money, it will be well spent. And and all of these things might have to be going on at once. Sometimes your words need to tell people what you do. I was an executive coach for 15 years. And one of the things I found about coaching is the first 20 minutes of any conversation with a prospect is explaining to them what coaching was. Whereas now, with Ideas Unleashed, my current company, one of the things we do is we work with authors or speakers or coaches or thought leaders who want to produce online products, and we help them create an online product business. People get that really quickly. Okay? You have an author has a book, author wants to have a whole set of products and be making money from them. We take the book and turn it into a suite of products, and we market it for them. We run the whole business. All they have to do is provide the brand and the intellectual content.
Well, that's fantastic, especially in people who don't know you. I mean, I do know you, and I know what your expertise and background is, not just with working with startups, but also with language, which again, I can't highlight enough the critical importance of not just knowing what to say, but knowing how to say it and how to craft it finally so that it comes across in your branding and your marketing messages and your advertising and in the actual communication of the documents to all of your various audiences. It's so that should be a phenomenal service that you're offering. So when are you planning on launching your platform?
Well, it's not a platform. I mean, we actually build the business for you. So we get in there and we help people figure out what they're doing and how they're going to do it, and then we work with them to produce what they're doing. So this isn't a platform. It's an organization in essence. And we have part of the reason we're in stealth mode is at the moment we have more prospects than we can handle, and we want to make sure we do a good job with them. So we're going to be spending the first few months of 2016 doing a pilot with a very limited and carefully selected set of partners to make sure that we have all the moving pieces down, and that then when we really start taking people on in earnest, we're confident that we can deliver. Because this is the first company where I've really been the principal entrepreneur. And all the other companies, I've either been part of a founding team or I've been like employee number 0.
Right.
This is really the first time that I have been the number one driving force behind everything. And maybe this is a mistake. Right? Maybe I just need to be blindly optimistic, as we talked about earlier.
Well, we all, I'm a big fan, and I've said this frequently on some of my other interviews, is like, you got to make mistakes, and you can't be afraid to make mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes, so you might as well make them quickly so that you can get the learnings quickly and make better mistakes the next time.
Well, and make your mistakes in situations where a mistake isn't going to cost you.
Right.
Or it's going to cost you as little as possible. So that's one of the reasons behind doing a pilot the way that we're doing it, is we're going to be doing it a pilot with people who are friendly, friends, and worth it, so that we can make a lot of mistakes. We can do a lot of learning. we can get to the point where we know what our costs are very quickly, where we know what kinds of arrangements our clients and our partners are willing to do in terms of payment schemes and payment terms of pay up front, et cetera, where we can really have a laboratory, try a lot of things until we find what's the combination of things where we are providing a service that is deeply and sorely needed, that's very valuable to people, and that we can provide it at a price that is less than they're willing to pay, such that we make a profit and can then grow.
Right, exactly.
Having our first client be Martha Stewart, not a good idea. You screw up. You don't want to screw up with Martha Stewart.
Right, exactly.
You want to be the 10th or 11th client, so that when you screw up with Bernice's green growing things plant store, and so you get eaten by an Audrey too. Whatever, you go on to the next one, and pretty soon.
I was working with a client who had gotten some great introductions and suddenly found himself in an audience with the folks at Target and Walmart to talk about his product. And he simply wasn't ready to present. And I tried to communicate that to him, but he wanted to take advantage of the opportunity so bad that he was insisting on going. And I tried to prep him, but there was no way he was ready. And he went and nothing happened. So it's kind of like a blown opportunity at this point, where you went in and you look like a schmuck in front of people who matter.
It's even worse than a blown opportunity, because once you've done that, now you're that guy. They're not going to have you back for a second meeting, unless you have some sort of ongoing relationship with them. And again, that's the idea in my mind. They say fail fast, fail fast frequently until you find the combination that works. This is one of the problems, by the way, with accepting a lot of outside investor money. Is along with outside investor money, you typically are committing to a particular strategy, or at least a universe of strategies.
Right.
And when you do that, it impedes your ability to pivot. As much as everyone likes to use those words and so on and so forth and go, ooh, pivot. If you've taken $1 billion worth of investment capital, as a company like Uber has, you're pretty tied into one particular business. You can't just say, whoops, we were wrong. Here's your money back. It's just because even if the investors were willing to hear that and were willing to not react, apoplectically, at that level of exposure, at that level of like publicity and public profile, you're going to screw your reputation with suppliers and customers, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, make your bets small and scale them as you can.
Exactly. Because once you can do it small, first of all, you're going to figure out a lot of things that don't work, and you're going to adjust and modify your strategy so that then you can begin to scale to a larger and a larger client. And by the time you get to the Targets and Walmarts of the world, or the big corporate customers, what you're talking about. You've answered all the questions, and you're very clear on the strategy, and that it works at scale, and it's sustainable long term.
And by the way, to continue using Uber as an example, for those people who remember Uber when they started as a luxury car service. They didn't start as a competitor to taxis. They started as a way to absorb the excess capacity for town cars and for black car services. And originally Uber was all black car services, and they started with black car services and shifted down market as they proved that their software worked, that people would pay for it, that, et cetera, et cetera. So they actually have done a very good job of successive iteration and failing and learning from their mistakes, et cetera, et cetera. The part that I find interesting is simply the size of the investment capital they have, because the very same business capitalized with $100,000, it might be an unbelievably fabulous business. If you capitalize it with $100 million, it might be a really crappy business, because there's a limit to how big the market is.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things that I kind of have an eyebrow raised, and I'm curious to see about a company like Uber, is that Uber's capitalization is so outrageous at this point. They need to be able to give a return to those investors. Well, to give a return at that scale is not a small trick.
It's not a small trick for large experienced companies or investors to be able to do effectively. We're talking about $1 billion. The other thing is it puts tremendous pressure on the CEO to deploy that capital. So the tendency is, whether you like it or not, you're going to have a bias to deploy it to further a mission, rather than doing small tests like you were talking about and scaling up on successes. You're going to start buying banner ads on in Times Square and high flashy things that are
acquiring companies and acquiring other companies
that are maybe not in line with your strategic vision or what the true market potential is of the company or the product. So,
well, this goes right back to our conversation about Warren Buffett that we started off with earlier, which is that one of Warren's biggest skills is the ability to sit on cash until the right investment comes along. And when a bunch of investors have given you $1 billion, first of all, you're not going to be able to raise another round unless you spin this one.
Right.
But secondly, it's tempting, especially, keep in mind, a lot of these people don't have that much business experience. I mean, these people who are running, who are given the $1 billion to deploy. So it's not like they have deep, wise experience that they're using to decide how to deploy this. They're just like, oh boy, money, yay! Let's all eat sushi. I went to a venture capital funded company in Silicon Valley that had 500 employees, and I had lunch in their lunchroom, and it blew me away. Like, they literally, just the lunch that day that was, and I don't think we had to pay for it. I think this was just, supplied by the company, was a delicious seared ahi tuna, like sushi grade tuna on a sesame salad. It was fabulous. I mean, it was something that I would easily have paid $20 to $30 for at a restaurant. And this was just what they were serving in their cafeteria. And I remember looking at this going, number one, this is a far cry from when I got involved with my first startup, where we literally had a board on 2 filing cabinets, and that was our desk.
Right.
Two is I happen to know what the company is. Of course, I was there, and they're not profitable.
Right.
So it's not like they're necessarily spending this money wisely. Now, maybe they are if this is what it takes to get those programmers. But to feed 500 people at that level of quality every day, I would argue that really is a questionable use of money. So, like, even if you can raise it, it's just not a good business decision necessarily.
Years ago, many of the insurance companies were extraordinarily profitable and still are extraordinarily profitable. Even AIG, most people, because they don't process beyond the headlines, but AIG, the insurance company, was never in jeopardy. It was the financial spinoff that they had created that had done all the bad bets on derivative securities and so forth. So the AIG insurance company was never at risk, and in fact, they had the other company had petitioned the bankruptcy court to try and allow them to go after or get into the assets of the insurance company to pay off some of their debts, and the court said no, because those assets are reserved for paying off the claims of the insured, etc. Rightly so. So what the insurance companies were doing early on is they were just making so much money that they offered all of their employees free lunch. And this was a tradition in the insurance business that lasted until well into the 70s or 80s. And my first job out of college was at an insurance company. And at that point, they had subsidized lunches. So I think my cafeteria lunch, like you were talking about, was like $1 or $1.20. Whereas if I went outside to get lunch, it would cost $5 or $6 for the same, equivalent, or maybe $7 or $8, right? So it was heavily subsidized, but they eventually did away with all of that because, long term, when you're feeding tens of thousands of people every single day, it's, not sustainable, maybe not the best use of shareholder capital.
Well, I think it's a fine use of shareholder capital.
If you happen to be an employee, it is, definitely.
Yeah, well, I feel obliged here to point out to people the definition of an equity holder. The actual definition is the residual claimant. That's the word residual is there for a reason, because they get paid last. That's what an equity holder is. And in return for being the residual claimant, they also get a claim on the upside if the company does really well. The notion of starving all of the other claimants so the shareholders can do really well regardless, that was never the intent. That is all a new reinterpretation. You can read about this in a book called The Myth of Shareholder Value, which is a couple years old.
Put it in the chat for people. The Myth of Shareholder Value. Who's it by?
I don't remember her name. I know her. Don't tell her I don't remember her name.
Okay.
Anyway, The Myth of Shareholder Value. I keep wanting to say Lynn Payne, but it's not Lynn Payne. She's an ethics professor. The Myth of Shareholder Value. Yeah.
I'm going to put the other book in here too. Words That Work by Frank Lutz.
The thing that's important to remember, you know how they talk about if you want to learn how to play a good game of golf, you aim past the ball. If you aim for the ball, you won't do that well. You have to aim past the ball, move the club past the ball, and as it happens to go through the ball, boom, the ball is going to go far away. And shareholder value and profit is the same way. Those are the results of doing good business. They're not the purpose of doing business. If the only reason you're in business is to make money, or is to get the money, right? I mean, for God's sake, go into a commission-based business where you get paid as a percentage of the value that other people create, which basically means financial services or some sort of brokerage thing, and concentrate there. That's how you make. If all you care about is money, that's how you do it. If you're an entrepreneur, I would hope you're doing it because you actually want to provide a product or service to people or solve a real problem. And if you solve a real problem, and if you solve it well, you will not hurt for shareholder value, and you will not hurt for profit. But if you spend all of your time trying to figure out how to finagle shareholder value and profit out of something that isn't doing that well, all you're going to do is starve half of the beast to pay the other half. And we can argue about whether the shareholders should be the half that get starved or whether the employees should be the half that get starved. My personal preference, as somebody who has been both a shareholder and an employee, my personal preference is to pay the employees more. They're the ones actually creating the value. All the shareholders are doing is they do a one-time infusion of capital. That's it. And I happen to think that the people who show up and work 40 to 60 hours a week
or more in startups often.
Yeah. Those are the people who should receive the lion's share of the value. However, I'm clearly in the extreme minority in that point of view. So, I think everyone wants to be the one who gets paid, who makes all the money without doing the work. Because I remember the weird part is most of my savings is money that I have made by owning shares in companies, not by doing actual work. And I remember when the first company that I was a part of the founding team of went public, and all of a sudden I found myself sitting on a lot of money. Which, by the way, you can lose very rapidly by investing in a lot of other startups. It's nice that they give you the opportunity to do that. There's a reason that VCs invest other people's money and not their own. But I was sitting on this pile of money, and I just remember I felt guilty because this company was 8 or 9 years old, and there were people who had joined the company just weeks after we founded it who didn't make anywhere near the kind of money that I made. And they had worked their butts off, and I didn't stay with the company. I was only there for a few weeks. And then I went off and got a full-time job somewhere else because they couldn't afford to pay me and I needed cash. And yet somehow I got to get all the money that was made by their hard work. That didn't feel right to me. I took it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not done. But even with that event, it's always to me been very strange that we are happy to allocate the lion's share of the value created to people whose major contribution is they wrote a check. Like, why is it that check is so much more valuable than the actual work that went into making the business exist? It is what it is. It's only taken me 30 years. I'm starting to come to grips with it all at this point. But even so, we're with Ideas Unleashed. One of the things we're looking at, because we're creating full businesses for people, and one of the aspects of the businesses we do is we have to do internet marketing for people, because if you're helping someone create an online company, there'll be a marketing component. And what we're finding is, if we, and there's also a product development piece that we're doing and a branding piece. I mean, we're doing a whole business, and we're looking at it. We're going, if we simply did nothing but the internet marketing piece and marketed ourselves as an internet marketing agency, we could actually probably make more money than we can make putting together the entire business for people. I mean, it's just because the main thing people want is, we need marketing, and they're willing to pay a lot of money for it. Whereas many fewer people are saying we need a whole business, and the ones who are saying, we're not interested in putting in the kind of money that it would take to fund a whole business. But the reason we started the company isn't just to make money. We started the company because we believe that there is a category of people out there who have great and amazing content, but not great and amazing businesses, because they're spending all of their time developing their great and amazing content and their expertise, and they're doing amazing things in the world, and they don't have time to build a business. The way we put it is we say, we want Rembrandt to spend his time painting, not doing A/B testing on his website and measuring.
Exactly. There's no shortage of phenomenal ideas out there, but there is a tremendous shortage of people who know how to execute and make things happen. And not everybody has all the skills that you need to put a business together. And I've seen many, many businesses over the years. People have approached me, because they've heard about, all the capital that I've raised over the years and the other companies I've been involved with. And, people have highly variable skill sets, okay, from simple things like we were talking earlier about, like, how the English language works and how important it is, to things like being able to do financial forecasts and package together, a business plan that makes sense, that you can, communicate effectively, your business model with. And the other thing that you've touched on extensively in this conversation is misaligned incentives. So people who are putting their blood, sweat, and tears into building these companies and ideas are not always, and definitely not consistently, compensated vis-a-vis the work that they've put in, the value that they've created, or compared to the value of other pieces such as capital that come in. So there's a widely disparate set of incentive structures and a widely disparate set of compensation schemes that lead to extraordinarily variable results, and we wonder why things don't work well. But there are best practices that people could and should be modeling, or at least investigating, that can take us in that direction. So there's a real need for that kind of consulting.
And I guess the point that I really want to make with this is that you want to be clear about, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, why you're in business. Because we're clear that we're not just in business to make money for the shareholders, who are me and my partner. We're in business because we want to hang out with awesome people who have amazing world-changing ideas and are out there doing it, but they're just having trouble making money with it. Those are the people we want as our community. That's our motivation. So, we do have discussions of, well, maybe we should stop doing the whole business thing, and maybe we should only try to become, grand internet marketers. But that's not the main thing we want to do. That's an important and super important aspect of it, but it's not the reason we're in business. And this is one of the things that I think is important to get clear on, is why are you starting a company? If the only reason is to make money, that's fine. That's a perfectly good reason. But just be clear on that and choose what business you start accordingly. And if you're there because you want to hang out with certain kinds of people, those are who you want to serve, great. But just make sure that that's really what you're doing. Now, if you get in there and you're doing your rapid failing and you discover, wow, I really want to hang out with starving artists, but I can't find anything to do where they will pay me enough money that I can live. Okay, so maybe that's not actually viable. Maybe you need to get your desire to hang out with starving artists met by going to Burning Man every year. Well, I don't know if the artists at Burning Man are starving. Burning Man attendees, I know most of them are starving. And that's how you get your artist fix. And then for your business, you do something else. Once upon a time, I think the prevailing idea was, for business, you just do whatever it is that you do to make money. And if it's something that you can do and just show up and turn the crank and make money, I say sure. And I'm not a believer. I'm actually not a believer, believe it or not, that I'm not a believer, believe it or not. Okay. I love it when people are passionate about what they do. And I love it when people are finding ways to live their passion. I do not believe that do what you love and the money will follow. I know too many actors to believe that. And I do not believe that you have to be passionate about what you do. I know plenty of people who just show up, turn the crank of whatever their business is, and make enough money to go off and be passionate in the rest of their life. In fact, if you want to hear a whole talk I've given on this, which I gave at Harvard Business School, actually, to 850 people just a few weeks ago, if you go to steverrobbins.com, STEVERRobbins.com/LELHBS. This is the Harvard Business School version, which stands for Living an Extraordinary Life, HBS version. If you want the non-HBS version, just go to steverrobbins.com/LEL, and you can hear the talk. What I am a believer in is that you should orient your life around your passion, and then if you can make it into a career, yay. If you can't make it into a career, find a career that fits in the gaps where your passion isn't, and that is capable of sustaining your passion. And with entrepreneurship, one of the advantages of entrepreneurship is that it can be flexible in the sense of how much time you have, et cetera, et cetera. So you can decide, we're going to be a consulting firm, but we're only going to work 9 to 5. And we're not going to go out to client sites. Now people say, well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to survive? The answer is, we're going to look for local clients. It means we have to become extraordinarily well-known in our city. And we have to get really familiar with the problems that people have. And we'll probably have to work harder than someone who's willing to take clients anywhere in the world. But if we're really clear that what we want is a consulting company that gives us our evenings free so that we can indulge in our passion, which theater was a passion of mine for a while and maybe come again once I have a little more free time. But you can structure your job to support your passion without your job having to be your passion. Now, in the case of entrepreneurship, you have to work really hard, potentially, and put in a lot of effort and be prepared to work a lot of hours and at random times, et cetera, et cetera. Since that just tends to be the reality of how a lot of entrepreneurship works, the reason passion is useful because it keeps you going. Right. Also, when you're any type of leader, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're a leader in a mid-sized company or in a large company, one of the pieces of a leader's job is to show up, model the behavior they want from people, and be really optimistic and at least have the illusion of knowing what they're doing. That's actually what leaders do.
That is what leaders do, but that's not what CEOs necessarily do.
Well, correct.
Or founders necessarily do.
But if you're in a startup and you're getting people to work for less than market rate, like right now, I need to find some people who will do certain kinds of work for me and I can't afford to pay them. And to get those people on board, I have to be able to give them relationally and aspirationally. I have to give them either a feeling of purpose or a vision they can buy into. It's one of the reasons that we have a really clear reason why we know why we're in business. Because when we meet somebody that we want to get involved with, if we just say, well, we're looking for a way to make money, and so we'd like to hire you to be a provider, and we can't make money right now by paying you your full rate, so we want to hire you for cheap. Really? Come on. No one's going to sign up for that. But if we say, you know what, we're in business because we want to meet the most awesome people in the world and help them build businesses. We can't afford to pay you right now, but would you like to come with us and help meet some of the most awesome people in the world and build businesses? There's some number of people who will accept a below market salary for that and will come be part of that. So that's really, in my mind, where the passion and the belief in your vision and your purpose comes in. It is a form of compensation that you're giving to people, which is and motivation that you're giving to people, yourself included, which is non-monetary, but which does connect with people's passion and values and things like that. And that's why it's important. It's literally compensation and motivation. And as you get bigger, you can afford to pay people cash instead. Now, a lot of people would really rather work for less cash and more motivation and purpose than for more cash.
That's something that's another pet topic for me, is that when you've got a dream, a vision, and a plan, there's such a lack of leadership that if you really are that leader, if you are that person, people will follow you. They'll follow that lead. They'll follow that vision because they want to belong to and be a part of something that matters. So many businesses and companies out there are doing stuff that's really either, doesn't matter, doesn't make a huge difference. As you were saying, when you were starting out with Bell Labs, you would have been this little micro dot on the speck of this one building in this one location, hoping to rise to the top of that building in 35 years. That's not a very compelling vision for the future. You've got to provide people a compelling vision for the future so they want to, be a part of creating that vision, but you also need to provide the incentives along the way that are going to keep people going in that direction. So otherwise, you just lose too many people.
Can I tell you the goofy thing about Ideas Unleashed?
Yes, sure.
All right. Just a second. So on our very first day when we were getting together, we said, getting together in person to do work, we said, we want to wear business clothes. We wanted to be a clear, because we're working out of my house right now, we said we wanted there to be a clear line between hanging out and between we're now in work mode. But we didn't like to wear suits. So we said, you know what? Why don't we like to wear suits? And in my case, I find them physically restrictive.
Especially the tie. The tie is the worst.
Oh God, yes. But I thought, what could I wear that would make me feel awesome? Where I would really look forward to coming into work every day. And I thought, I want to be a superhero. And my business partner said, I like the idea. So our official work clothes. This is my Professor X T-shirt. Nice. He's the Flash because I'm the person who's the coordinator and bringing the team together. He's dipping around, getting things done rapidly. And the logo and the business cards that we've had designed, we had someone do a design, and oh my God, he nailed it. The instructions we gave him is we said we want to have a corporate logo that looks enough like the sort of thing a superhero would wear that people who are kind of in the know about superheroes will look at it and feel like a superhero by looking at it. And people who aren't would just go, oh, what an attractive corporate logo. Man, did he nail it. We have spent a truly absurd amount of money getting our business cards printed. It turns out the logo works in many different colors, so we're going to use it like the Star Trek emblem. We're going to actually give people patches that they're going to have, and you have to earn your patch when you come work with us. And when you do something that the team considers superhero-like, you get your little patch, and that now becomes
or a star toward your patch or something.
Right, and it's on our business cards. And the funny part is, so we spent I think like $600 or something having the business cards made, because the business cards actually have the patch attached to them, and you peel them off, etc. And they have our wonderful, amazing superhero logo. And we talked about it for a long time, because at our stage, spending $600 on business cards, absurd, makes no sense at all.
Sure.
And then we looked at how excited we were. It was very clear that we just wanted any excuse possible to do these cards. And every single person we've shown the designs to, and every single person we've told about it, everyone's like, I want to be a superhero too. Can I come be a superhero? And we looked at this and we said, you know what? What started as this little offhand thing on the first day, this is actually a deeply motivating thing, because people don't get a chance to be a superhero in their life.
Right.
We've decided it is worth $1,000 or $600 to us to have these cards made, because when we give them to people, we feel like superheroes. They feel like superheroes. And our value proposition isn't just, hey, smart speaker, we want to come build a business for you. It's, you're a superhero. We want to help you learn to fly. Are you in?
Right. You know, we've got Tim Gillette on, who uses the metaphor of like rocker and being a rock star, and I have another friend who uses that metaphor as well. But the same kind of thing, where you're getting people engaged into some vision, some greater vision of themselves that's going to keep them.
It's something people get emotional about being a rock star.
Exactly.
Now it's true. Some people look at us like we're crazy. Fine, we won't work with those. I was talking recently to somebody who holds 4 Guinness Book of World Records.
Wow.
And I was saying to this person, I was explaining the whole superhero thing. And I said, let me just be perfectly honest. I think you're a superhero. And I would love the chance to work with you. And that person's response was, oh my God, I want to be a superhero too. Now, you already are, but they want the patch. And they only get the patch by coming and working with us. But think about that for a minute. There's an awful lot of people who would go, superheroes, that's too weird. I don't want to, you're not being serious. What we want is the people who can earn multiple world records and say, you know what? Yeah, Flash, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Professor X, Rogue, I'm in. And it's an interesting, we're being so explicit about this. We're actually taking notes on it. And I'm in talks with a professor from Harvard Business School about using this as a case study someday. Because we're really, can I tell you about a couple of other unusual things we're doing? Just
absolutely. Definitely.
If we're all,
and by the way, if anybody has questions, just type /Q and space and your question, or if anybody would like to jump in with a question, type it in first, and maybe we can get you on the chat here with Steve Robbins. Also, if you're on the chat, if you wouldn't mind, please tell a little bird or tell your friend. We'd appreciate that greatly.
Okay, so I went and got my notebooks, or my file folders. So one of the other things, they say what gets measured gets managed.
Absolutely.
And, I was talking with a group of entrepreneurs once several years ago, and the topic was leadership. And I said, how many people in this room know what their most profitable product was? And about 2/3 of the hands went up. And I said, now, keep your hand up if you monitor the profitability of that product on a quarterly basis. A few of the hands went down. I said, now, how many of you monitor it on a weekly basis? A few more hands went down. I said, and how many of you monitor it on a daily basis? And some more hands went down. There was still about half of the room with their hands up. And I said, now, put your hands down. How many of you know who your 3 most important employees are? The ones who, without it, your company would tank. Everyone raises their hand. Say, now, how many of you know what motivates those employees? Half of the hands go down. Said, now, of the rest of you, how many of you actually monitor that person's engagement status and make sure they're getting enough of the things that motivate them? All of the hands went down. And my point trivially made is that we pretend that we pretend that we are somehow rigorous about money. A lot of times we aren't. It's just easy to measure. And yet the other things that are important, we don't bring nearly the same amount of rigor. So
and that becomes a bias or a blind spot for most people that they don't even know that they have, that they're just assuming they're doing the right things, but without measuring, you have no benchmark for determining whether you're getting closer to or further away from what your ultimate vision or goal is.
Exactly. And my paper is somewhere in a stack of paper that I had to move to set up my webcam, so I'm not going to get it. But what we've created, since it's me and a business partner and we're superheroes, we have the dynamic duo check-in, which we do every time we get together in person. And it is a checklist of all of these things we want to touch base on. 2/3 of the checklist is devoted to things like, operations. Are we happy with infrastructure? What are the current client issues that we have to deal with? What are the current service partners, the people who we are in partnership with to provide our service? What are the issues with them? But the last third are issues that are interpersonal and emotional. And my favorite one of the whole thing is complete the following sentence. The thing I'm not saying to you because I'm afraid to say it is blank. And we designed that question, and we do that at least on a weekly basis, if not more often, because we want to catch any of the interpersonal stuff before it gets to a crisis point. We don't want anyone to have lingering unconscious resentments about anything. We don't want people to have hidden whatever. We want to be able to have that kind of overt communication from day one. So if you're an entrepreneur where things super, super powerfully depend upon really tight interpersonal relationships, don't put in place measurements of things like how are you doing with your clients and how are you on track with your projects. Also put in place the emotional stuff and the leadership stuff, because it does matter. If someone isn't showing up because they're not appropriately committed to the project, it's your job as the entrepreneur or the leader either to replace the person or to get them committed. And by the way, if they're not committed, probably anyone you replace them with is also gonna not be committed, because what it means is you didn't connect with whatever it took to get them committed.
So I'm going to stop you for a second, because
I could go on forever. I will be quiet now. I'll let you talk.
Two things that come to mind before I lose them. Number one is W. Edwards Deming, who's brilliant, TQM guy, and he was the guy who taught the Japanese about quality after World War II and helped bring that economy. Pardon?
I trained with him personally.
I won't say I trained with him, but I did manage to sit on 2 of his classes at NYU when I was a student there. So he was still teaching well into his 90s until I think a few weeks before his death. So he was absolutely passionate, and he would come to life when he would start talking about some of these principles. But he would drive home the point that it's the job of the leader to create the system, or to fix the system. The employees are going to work in the system, but the leader, the managers, as he called it, have to fix, the systems and create better systems.
And the people systems and the operational systems, you need both.
Right. And in Jim Collins' Good to Great, which is a fantastic book on how to build and run a successful company, it's really more designed toward companies that are doing well already, but are trying to make the leap from good companies up to great companies. But fabulous insights, one of which is, a point you just touched on, which is you want to get the right people on the bus. You want to make sure you get the right people in the right seats on the bus. And you want to make sure that you get the wrong people off the bus, because if you've got the wrong people on the bus, they become toxic. Now, it's not exactly the point that you made, but I think it's an important point to highlight, because the other thing is you want to make sure that you're not driving the right people off the bus because you don't have the right systems in place, that you're not losing good people for the wrong reasons because you're incompetent or not paying attention to these emotional issues, or modifying and adapting both the people systems as well as the business systems.
You know what's weird is that there's so many people who are leaders or managers who are afraid to delegate and they don't trust their people. And ever since my first management job, I've thought like that's insane. There's a bunch of people who want to do all the work for me, and why would I not want to delegate? I'll sit here and tell you what to do and you do it. Like for centuries, people killed to get into that position. And now people are like, oh, I can tell people what to do, but I'm afraid to let them do it. I'm like, please, you need to go watch Cleopatra. Look at her. She's the role model. I tell you, darling, bring me the peeled grapes. I wish to sip some wine. That's the life. I mean, geez,
delegate everything.
Yeah.
And it's easier than ever now. It's easier than ever as an entrepreneur, not just with, employees and interns, but now with virtual assistants and outsourcing things, it's easier than ever to outsource stuff that you don't have expertise at and you're not good at and you don't like to do. Find somebody who loves to do that job. Find somebody who's the best admin. I'm terrible with admin, so I always try and find and surround myself with people who are great at admin because I don't want to do it. I'm not good at it, and everything runs much smoother when I've got great administrative people around me. If you're not the technical person, don't try and do everything. There's something to be said for like figuring out how to do stuff, but if it's distracting you from your core vision, mission, goals, etc., then find great people and delegate it to. Absolutely.
There are people in the world. One of my friends from business school went off to some paper manufacturing company. That wouldn't be Kraft, but they made Downy. And they made like Downy with purple flowers. And this guy was passionate about paper towels with purple flowers. And you know what I say? I say good for him. Because
right, exactly.
Someone has to be passionate about it.
That's right.
I am not the passionate person about that, but I am so glad that passionate person exists, which also means if I happen to need paper towels with purple flowers, there is someone out there who I can delegate it to and he'll make them.
Exactly. So Lori's got a question, and Lori, I don't know if you want to jump in. You've been on for a while. I have opened up the seat, but what is the one thing most bootstrap startups overlook besides capital? So I'm going to let Lori in and have her included in the conversation here.
All right, here. Hello, Lori.
Hey, Lori, how are you?
Hi, guys. How are you?
Doing well, thanks.
So
thanks for joining. Oh, Steve.
He fell off the internet.
Right, call back in, Stever. You had a little technical.
I still see me.
Oh, you see you?
I see you. I see me. Yes.
Oh, whoa, that's trippy.
That is trippy. That must be.
He fell off for real.
All right. Please dial back in, Stever.
I've fallen off Blab more than once, so.
Yeah, I usually have to refresh my screen or something.
Yeah. Technology.
Yeah, the beauty of technology. Well, I'll take your question off in case that was creating a problem.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't seen that you could put it in the empty seat, or did you do it through your software?
No, you do it. You click on the question. It shows up on the left when you're a host or co-host.
Right.
And I can click on pin again to bring it up, and then I can exit out to put it out. So, yeah, great little. Blab is in beta, and they're adding features all the time. So if you look in the bottom right under message, there's like the slash, all these slash commands that they've added now.
Right.
Kind of cool to watch the evolution of this as we're.
No, it is. It's very cool.
So, Stever, you might have to refresh your screen in order to be able to call back in.
He's actually not even showing on the.
Perhaps is. So, let's just talk about your question for a while hopefully he's coming back on. The one thing most bootstrap startups overlook. Besides
capital,
I think Steve and I were kind of addressing this earlier in the conversation. Is, I tell people all the time, you've got to have your story right, but it's really you've got to have your vision. Is your vision scalable and sustainable? Okay, and is it meaningful? Is it going to make the world a better place? Because if it's not, maybe you should focus your talents, attention, time, and energy and capital on something that will. I mean, a lot of people, you getting an idea in the shower, and great quote I've heard: any idiot can have a great idea in the shower. It's what happens when you get out of the shower that makes the difference, right?
Right.
So when you're starting on your venture, and let's say you're coming up with the pet rock, okay? So, all right, that's a great idea for a business that was very successful back in, I think, the 70s, and made that gentleman millions of dollars. It was an exercise in entrepreneurship for something that was, it created some little thing out of nothing, out of rocks, essentially, that this guy made into a small fortune for himself. But ultimately, is it something that's making the world a better place? Well, yeah, for some people, they like to have a pet rock, and maybe it made them a little happier to have a pet rock. But I like to tell people, focus on like maybe your larger vision. Okay, like people think they have to do something else to get the money to get to their larger vision, but why not start on your larger vision from the start? So if the guy was making pet rocks and his real dream was to, become an expert water skier, why not focus on water skiing? Maybe he would have come out with some innovation in water skiing that would have made him happier and made water skiers better off, and so on. So I'm not saying that you can't like start other businesses and make money. I mean, I think that's great, but I think you want to start with your vision, with who you are. Simon Sinek talks about start with why. And Steve and I were, Steve was talking earlier about passion and
by the way.
Yeah, I can see you now. Thanks for coming back on.
Yep.
It's like, passion maybe is overrated. Follow your passions, the money will follow. It doesn't always happen that way, obviously.
Well,
but I think
I'm not a passion person.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not a passion person anyway. I like living. So I'm one of those people that, what's her name? Elizabeth Gilbert calls the hummingbird. So passion isn't always, in fact, it's one of my pet peeves when I'm working with people. So it doesn't mean I don't have passion. But I think when you just say, follow that, I've watched too many people grow broke, and I usually fix their problems after they go broke. That's who comes to me. The people who have plugged $100,000, $200,000 into a business, and then it failed because the website didn't work. Then I go, okay, now let's set your revenue streams. So the reason why I'm asking the question, what's the one thing most bootstrap startups overlook because of startup capital, is I got a windfall. And so after a decade of literally creating something out of nothing, literally being, I live in the middle of nowhere, was raising my kids, was bored to death. They don't need political analysts where I live. So I built information products, didn't even know what they were called. Finally got some money. I'm getting buy-in beyond the money. When those people, you have that idea and you're like Tom Sawyer and they're like, hey, can I paint your fence? And you're like,
oh yeah, sure.
Yes. Yes.
Bring your
By the way,
my
my spare bedroom is really nice too, and it would look great with a white coat of white paint.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, here's the paint. Oh no, you want to give me the paint? Yes. It's kind of surreal because this has all happened in like the last week, and I went from.
Well, congratulations, by the way.
I have to work really hard. Thank you. It's been. You're watching me on my Monday morning as I sit there going, I still have to restructure everything I'm doing. So how do I do that? So that's why I'm thinking. I'm really good at leading people. Not a problem. I'm a community builder. I can get people to take a bullet anytime. That's fine.
Well, can you get people to stop making bullets? That would be a better use of your time.
If I build out my vision, that's exactly what it's for.
I think something that we could all use in America right now is we've got way too many bullets.
Well, that's okay. That's because we've been dropping them everywhere else. So my big vision works on economic sustainability and raising the bar, because almost all of our problems globally are socioeconomic. Now, we say that in pretty words. I don't bore people with my geekiness, but my question is really, when you're structuring it, because that's where I'm at, you can tell I'm way up here. I'm structuring this now. I have my big vision. I've had it mapped out for a decade, actually. And just waiting, till I could build it. Besides the people side, I know that's the one side a lot of business people forget. What's the other thing people forget besides having good, personnel practices, besides having the vision? Vision, I don't have a problem. What's that one thing? If you could do it over, what would it be?
Well, I'll tell you, I think it's a one or the other thing, generally speaking. Most of the people that I have found either are good with the people side of things, or they're good with the operational and the business side of things. And it's sort of like, what's the big blind spot? It depends upon what your personal bent is. I find an awful lot of people do not think well about process. So if you're someone who's great with people, but you put together really inefficient systems and you don't have things operating in a streamlined fashion, you're going to try to grow and everything's going to explode. And you're going to have wonderful, well-meaning people going, how come I still have to run around looking for the graphic that I need to be able to put together this landing page? And I know the graphic designer put it, and she's like, oh, well, I put it in a Dropbox, I think. And you're like, well, but there's 400 things because this is the 90th email we've sent out this year, and there's 400 graphics. Which one is it? Oh, I think it's called prettyhorsegirl.jpg or something.
Now you know why I've worked alone for so long.
Well, one of the things I mentioned that
that sounds like we've identified what you're looking over, or your particular blind spot is building team.
Well, see, and a lot of my blind spot actually is the people side. Believe it or not, I have an intellectual understanding of it, and I'm good at it when I remember to do it. But what comes to me instinctively, my instinct is to create systems, and people are the part that I have to put conscious effort into. Now, I can do both well enough that people think I'm good at both. Well, and I'm like, I am good at both, but one of them is as natural as breathing, and the other one is a very learned set of behaviors, that are not my natural mode of doing things. So the first thing that we did with Ideas Unleashed, is we said, okay, we're gonna put together a bunch of information products for me, because I also happen to be a thought leader with my Get It Done Guy podcast and stuff. So we put together a webinar series, and we tracked every frickin' little piece that we could of this. Like, oh, look, like with the example I just gave you with the graphic. I mean, real example. We're like, oh, we need a graphic for the landing page for the webinar registration page. We also need a graphic for the landing page for the sales page, because those, it turns out, are two different pages with the webinar platform I was using. And you know what? There are different resolutions. And where did we put
sizes
them? Right. And since we very, very foolishly started with a series of 6 webinars, the foolish side was it was complete chaos. But the really good side, but the really big benefit that came out of that is it showed us in no uncertain terms that we needed to develop some really serious organizational systems, or we're never going to be able to do this for 5 clients who are simultaneously running campaigns. So we developed a whole set of systems now where we could handle 20 people running simultaneous campaigns, and we've got those systems in place. We don't have the people yet. So for us, the systems part is in place. It's the people part that is less in place, because we were doing this whole superhero thing, and we have 2 writers working for us. And it just occurred to me last night. I'm like, duh, we have to sit down with the writers and really get them involved and emotionally invested. We just hired people, and now I'm like, but at least I remembered. I know that the people part is important. If I put it on my to-do list, I'll do it. It sounds like you have.
I'm with you on that. Yeah. I studied people because that was the one thing I never understood.
Yeah.
My whole life, that's what I studied. And it wasn't, people think it's because I'm good with people. I'm like, no, it's because from the time I was a kid, people confused me. So I studied them. What makes them tick?
Right.
Like I said, you're catching me at the stage of, I have to restructure this. So let's get it lined up.
So what is it that you have to, when you say you have to restructure this, what do you mean restructure? And what do you mean this?
I am literally going from being a one-woman operation. I didn't build teams because I didn't know people hired people. I came from I was an executive salesperson in a multinational overseas for a decade, and I came back to the States. I was raising my kids. It was a little bit of a exciting story, we'll put it that way. So I had to build myself up. And so when I ended up being able to just raise my kids, I was bored. When you have a 152 IQ, sitting in the middle and being Susie Q housemaker is not what you want to do. But the idea of going to work for some company where all they want is ROI and ROE and blah, blah, blah. I was like, that's boring. So I thought, why not learn how to build my own website? Why not? And so I became the fearless leader of the Crochet Liberation Front, which I stopped doing about 3 years ago. I had millions of followers worldwide. I'm not kidding. It's $1 billion industry, but I wasn't monetizing. And that was okay. That wasn't why.
Crocheted bow tie.
There you go. Awesome.
A friend of mine made it for me.
I actually had a follower, even though I don't do it. I killed the website. I had a follower crochet a doll of me. You know, you've made it when somebody makes an effigy out of it.
My mom crochets. My grandmother crocheted. We have a friend we saw last night who crocheted. We have a yarn store.
14.7. Well, yeah, because 14.7 million households in America crochet. It's $1 billion industry, just crochet.
Right. So let's get back to the restructuring.
But you still can't monetize it. But anyway, so see, that's 3 years ago. So I went off and retooled because my kids got big, and they grew up, and I could do what I wanted. And so what I built was what I saw with the average person, especially the makers, the creatives, the crazy people who want to make the world a better place. They lacked skills and knowledge and just setting up even just a home-based business. So I started teaching. And I've done pretty well. I found lots of great softwares, but again, I didn't know people outsource stuff. I'd be like, why would you outsource doing a PowerPoint when it takes you, half an hour to do that? Because it doesn't take other people half an hour to do that. They didn't have hours and hours to play on their computer like I did. I didn't think about that, I'm finding I didn't think about a lot of things.
Sorry, speaking of not thinking about things, I just noticed the time.
Yeah, we've been on for.
I have to leave, I have to travel and be somewhere in just a few minutes.
All right, so let me say thank you very much, Steve, for being on, and we'll talk later in the week or whenever you're free. Text me or email me.
Yeah, so Lori, send me an email. My email address is steverprivate. STEVERPRIVATE at steverrobbins.com.
It's not private anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess it is.
Wow. Yeah, you just put it on the internet, mister.
My current email address is steverprivate.
It's okay. Most people can't spell. It's okay. Most people can't spell.
The best way for future reference, Steve, is direct message on Twitter, and then you can do the emails there.
Yeah, I'm at Get It Done guy on Twitter. So apologies that I have to sign off so abruptly. That
right, great job. Thank you so much for being on for so long, Steve, and we'll catch up and do it again sometime.
Now, how do I?
I will click you out.
Ooh.
So anyway, sorry for blabbering on, but that was my question. Blab, so as I built this out.
So
yeah, it is blab.
So what is your specific, question or focus right now?
Well, as I go now to structure this out, because I went to an old buddy who's a brilliant web designer and web developer, and I have all the pieces, and he got excited. He goes, man, this is really cool. Pardon the dog barking. But this is really cool. I would love to help you beyond the website. Let's build this organization. So, and I'm excited because I know this person thinks similarly.
Right. And is the site all about crocheting and
No. This is totally different. The crochet is what led to this.
Okay, gotcha.
You know what I mean? It's helping. Like, there's 36 million Americans who are self-employed out of 100 million workers. 51% make $40,000 a year or less.
Right.
This is from the U.S. Census. This is from the IRS. I'm not making it up.
I've done some research on
most. Yeah. So most of these people, it's not about passion. It's about trying to pay their rent. It's about trying to feed their kids. They're in MLMs. They don't know they have a value. And so creating an organization where they get support, and I've got it all mapped out, and I'm not going to give it all away, but it's all mapped out. I had it mapped out years ago. I have all the documentation I could ever need written, how the structure works, how it works to build collaborative teams, to leverage yourself. What I would have needed starting out if I knew you could, you know, that kind of thing. And so when I'm looking at the other side of it, like the organization is a cool idea, but I also know from helping out a lot of not-for-profits in my area, people tend to lose sight of like one minor detail, either legally or fiscally, and so I'm just thinking of, if you knew like of people who start things up and you go, oh man, everybody forgets that. That's the question I'm asking. Well, the long way around.
You know, I'm gonna answer this different from what you, I think, might expect, but you touched on it in your discussion leading up to this, which is, you know, most people, even small entrepreneurs, are not making it, and they're doing the same thing over and over again, and they're trying to figure it out, and they're joining MLMs, or they're joining, you know, they're buying the latest course on how to make money on the internet, or they're, you know, doing, you know, they're getting caught up now. I mean, in radios and television advertising is looking for all these people for get rich quick schemes, etc., and people fall for that over and over again. So what people are missing is that in order to go on to a journey of any kind, an entrepreneurial journey, or even if you're just trying to get a better job in life, you know, go up the corporate ladder, the old style, or develop a, you know, a local business in your community, it's got to start with self-development. So for me personally, when I was beginning my own journey and trying to figure things out, I didn't know anything, and I didn't even know what I didn't know. I mean, I was completely unconscious, incompetent, and had to figure out a lot of stuff. And I didn't have, you know, my mom was a housewife. My father was essentially a civil servant, social worker, so he didn't have a background in business that he could guide me. My grandfather was a factory worker. My other grandfather was a businessman and had a lot of information I probably could have learned from, but he was, you know, sick, and he died by the time I was 17 years old. So I had to find mentors, and, you know, for me personally, I turned to books and reading. And, you know, I picked up my first book when I was about to graduate college, I guess, which was How to Interview For and Get a Job, right? And then, yeah, that was like what was important. So I was like, all right, how do I do this? I don't know. I don't have anybody in my life who can teach me. So I went to a book and you know, read that book, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to do what they said in this book. And I wasn't much of a reader. I was a math major, and because I didn't like to read. But, you know, later on, I got a couple jobs, and I'm working on, you know, something that I thought I loved, and it turns out I hated it. Or I hated the environment that I was in. Yeah. And so I turned again to a book. I found a book that someone recommended on, you know, investing in stocks, and then another one on investing in real estate. And one of the phrases that stuck with me all these years was, the author was describing in the introduction. He said, when I was a young man and first starting out, I didn't want to buy books because it was like, oh, I didn't want to pay for it in hardcover. I'll wait for it to come out in paperback. I'll wait for it to come out to a library. And the decision that changed my life the most was that if I found a book that had information in it that I thought would benefit me right away, I decided right then and there I was going to buy that book and take it home and start to read it, no matter what the cost, whether it was, you know, $50 or $100. I didn't care. If that was the book that I needed to read, I was going to buy that book again. So I said, I'm going to, you know, I'm where he was at the beginning of his career. I'm going to adopt that philosophy, and I'm going to start buying and reading books, and I'm going to learn this stuff and figure it out. So the long-winded answer to the question that I think is most people look is that this is not about starting a business or making money. Okay, this is a journey of self-discovery and development. And unless you take that part of it seriously and work on making yourself better, we were talking earlier on the call about the critical importance of understanding the English language and how to use words, okay? Be able to write a letter. If you can't write a letter or an email, how are you going to write a business plan or a pitch deck? If you don't understand how to make people feel comfortable in an email, how are you going to sell to dozens or thousands or millions of people? Okay, so each of us has to dig down deep within ourselves, figure out what we lack, okay, and begin working on ourselves and begin building, number one, self-esteem and character, but number two, skills. And wherever we're deficient, we need to work on either strengthening them or finding people who can help us in those skills. So the process of entrepreneurship, and I learned more about myself in developing companies than I probably could have in any other way. And I've been working on myself
I'm with you.
all the way through. I've been reading books. I've been going to seminars. I've been going to networking events. I've been going to conferences. I've been watching webinars, and on and on and on. So through that process, what's changed, regardless of success or failure of any venture, is I've come through stronger, smarter, better every time, with more skills to invest into whatever it is that I'm doing next and be able to help more and more people. And at the end of the day, it's not about how much money you make. It's really about how much you're helping other people. Because at the end of the day,
I agree.
At the end of your life, you're going to look back and not say, oh, I made this amount of money or that amount of money. You're going to look, you know what? I made a difference for this person or that person, whether it's a family member or a member of your community or people that you touch with, your platform. That's what's going to make the difference. And in order to be able to be the person that makes that difference, we all need to work on it. We all need to become better. And we need to work the hardest at, liking ourselves. A lot of people don't like themselves. They have negative self-esteem or poor or low self-esteem. And until you can build up that self-esteem, how are you going to begin to lead other people? Okay, you've got to have a high positive self-esteem. And if you don't have it, go figure out how to get it. Go get, books in the library if you've got to start there on, things like how to win friends and influence people, or Think and Grow Rich, or what to say when you talk to yourself.
Yes, exactly.
Go back to these early classics. And learn how to, the power of your subconscious mind. Learn how to teach yourself how to like yourself, build this positive self-esteem so that, look, money is not a solution or a cure-all of any kind. Money makes you more of what you already are. So if you're already an asshole and you get a lot of money because you win the lottery, you're going to be a bigger asshole, right?
Sorry, I give that same speech. I love it. Word for word. If you're already an asshole, then it's just going to make you more of that. Exactly.
So why not work on, becoming a good person? Become a better version of yourself. Okay. And then when you get more money, then that better person is going to be magnified, and that better person is going to be able to help more people in your family, in your neighborhood, in your community, in your town, in your, region, in the world. So,
and then people hand you money and say, hey, go build your dream.
Exactly.
And then you sit there going, what do I do now?
So I'm going to have to jump
I don't
here.
have to do it all. But anyway, I want to thank you very much.
I would love to, have a conversation with you. DM me on Twitter, and
shall do.
Send me your email, and we can connect, and then we can schedule another conversation if you'd like to talk more about this stuff.
That would be so awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Great show.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. So I want to thank people who jumped in and out, and all of you who are watching on the replay. I'm Frank Clark, and I'm going to be doing shows on businesses and startups Mondays at 1 p.m. And I've got some very exciting developments coming up on a startup conference that I'm working on, which could be happening very, very quickly. And I will be giving out more details by Twitter. So please follow me on Twitter at Frank Clark Coach. And I look forward to seeing you guys all again next Monday. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.